Hello everyone, I'm a newcomer to this channel, and I wanted to share a story that's been kept in my family for years. It's about my uncle, a fisherman who encountered something out at sea, something that changed him forever. What I'm about to tell you isn't your typical ghost story. It's far more terrifying because it's real. Sit back, relax, and prepare yourself, because this is a journey into the unknown. Let me start by telling you a bit about my uncle, Mang Tonyo. He was a fisherman his entire life, growing up in a small coastal village in the Philippines. The sea was everything to him. It was his livelihood, his refuge, and his greatest love. He was known in the village as a man who could navigate the most treacherous waters, who had survived storms that others wouldn't dare to face. Mang Tonyo was the kind of man who didn't scare easily. He was a man of routine, setting out every evening and returning with the morning tide. His life was simple, and he liked it that way. But everything changed one night in late September 1998. It was a night that started out like any other, but would end in a way that none of us could have ever imagined. It was a calm evening when Mang Tonyo set out for his usual fishing trip. The sky was clear, the stars were bright, and the sea was as smooth as glass. It was the kind of night every fisherman hopes for: perfect weather and the promise of a good catch. Mang Tonyo's boat, a small, sturdy vessel he had built with his own hands, cut through the water with ease. He spent the first few hours of the night doing what he always did, casting his nets, checking the lines, and watching the stars. The night was peaceful, almost too peaceful. There was a stillness in the air, a quiet that felt both comforting and unsettling. But Mang Tonyo didn't think much of it. He was focused on his work, lost in the rhythm of the sea. As midnight approached, he had already filled his hold with fish. It was a bountiful night, and he was in good spirits. He decided to stay out a little longer, to enjoy the solitude and the calm before heading back to shore. But as the night wore on, something strange began to happen. Around 2 a.m., Mang Tonyo noticed a change in the atmosphere. The gentle breeze that had been blowing earlier had stopped, and the sea had grown eerily still. Even the usual sounds of the night, the creaking of the boat, the distant calls of seabirds, had fallen silent. It was as if the world had been put on pause. He felt a sudden unease, a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. It was a feeling he couldn't quite explain, a sense that something was watching him, something hidden beneath the surface of the water. He brushed it off at first, telling himself it was just his imagination, but the feeling wouldn't go away. He leaned over the side of the boat, peering into the water. The moon was bright enough that he could see several feet down, but what he saw made his blood run cold. There, just beneath the surface, was a dark, massive shape, slowly moving in the water. It was too large to be a fish, too deliberate in its movements to be a random current. At first, Mang Tonyo tried to rationalize what he was seeing. Maybe it was a school of fish, or a large sea turtle. But as the shape moved closer to the boat, he realized it was something else entirely, something far more terrifying. The dark mass circled the boat, slowly at first, then faster, creating ripples that disturbed the calm surface of the sea. Mang Tonyo's heart began to race. He had encountered dangerous creatures before, sharks, barracudas, but this was different. This was something he couldn't identify, something that defied explanation. He grabbed his flashlight and shone it into the water, but the beam barely penetrated the darkness. Whatever was down there, it was big, bigger than his boat, and it was getting closer. Suddenly, the boat lurched violently, as if struck by a massive wave. Mang Tonyo was thrown off balance, nearly falling overboard. He scrambled to grab hold of the railing, his hands trembling with fear. The dark shape was now right beneath the boat, so close that he could feel the water vibrating with its presence. The boat began to rock back and forth, as if caught in a powerful current. But the sea was still calm, too calm. It was then that Montano saw it, rising up from the depths. A massive head broke the surface of the water, followed by a long, sinuous body covered in rough, scarred skin. The creature was unlike anything he had ever seen, huge, ancient, and terrifying. Its eyes, the size of dinner plates, glowed faintly in the moonlight, giving it an otherworldly appearance. Its mouth, filled with rows of jagged teeth, opened slightly, as if tasting the air. For a moment, it just stared at Montano, as if sizing him up, deciding whether he was worth the effort. Montano was paralyzed with fear. He had heard stories of sea monsters, tales passed down by the old fishermen, but he had always dismissed them as legends. But now, faced with this creature, he realized that the stories were true. This was no mere fish. This was a leviathan, a beast from the depths of the ocean, and it was hungry. Without warning, the creature lunged at the boat, its massive body colliding with the hull. The impact was so powerful that the boat nearly capsized, and Montano was thrown to the deck, hitting his head hard. Dazed and disoriented, he struggled to get to his feet, his vision blurred. The creature struck again, this time from beneath the boat. The force of the attack lifted the boat out of the water, and Montano could hear the wood creaking and splintering under the pressure. Water began to pour into the boat through a crack in the hull, and Montano knew he was in serious trouble. In a desperate attempt to save himself, Montano grabbed the flare gun from the emergency kit. His hands were shaking so badly that he nearly dropped it, but he forced himself to focus. He aimed the gun at the creature and fired. The flare struck the beast on its side, and for a moment, the night was lit up with an intense red light. The creature let out a low, rumbling growl that seemed to shake the very sea. The flare didn't harm it, but it enraged it. The Leviathan lunged at the boat again, its massive jaws snapping shut just inches from where Montano stood. The boat was now sinking rapidly, and Montano knew he had only seconds to escape. With the boat sinking beneath him, Montano made a split-second decision. He grabbed a piece of debris and jumped into the water, swimming away from the sinking vessel as fast as he could. The cold water shocked his system, but he forced himself to keep moving, to put as much distance between himself and the creature as possible. But the Leviathan wasn't done with him yet. It followed him, its massive body gliding through the water with terrifying speed. Montano could feel it beneath him, the water churning violently as it approached. Every time he thought he had lost it, the creature would reappear, its dark shape looming beneath the surface. Montano clung to the debris, his arms and legs aching from the cold and the effort. He was exhausted, barely able to keep his head above water. But he knew that if he stopped, if he gave in to the fatigue, the creature would take him. He could feel its presence, a dark shadow just below the surface, waiting for the moment to strike. Just when Montano thought he couldn't hold on any longer, he heard a sound in the distance, the hum of an engine. He looked up and saw a light on the horizon, growing closer. A fishing boat was heading straight for him. He waved his arms frantically, shouting for help. The boat veered towards him, and within minutes, he was being pulled aboard by a group of fishermen. They were shocked by his condition, soaking wet, battered, and terrified. As they sped away from the area, Montano looked back at the water. The creature was gone, vanished into the depths as if it had never been there. But he knew it was still out there, lurking beneath the waves, waiting for its next victim. The fishermen tried to get him to talk, to explain what had happened, but Montano was in shock. He couldn't find the words to describe what he had seen, what he had experienced. All he could do was sit there trembling as the boat made its way back to shore. Mangtonyo was taken to the hospital where he was treated for his injuries. Physically, he recovered, but mentally, he was never the same. The experience had left him deeply traumatized, haunted by nightmares and flashbacks. He tried to tell people what had happened, but no one believed him. The other fishermen laughed it off as a tall tale, a story to scare the younger generation. But Mangtonyo knew the truth. He had encountered something real, something ancient and deadly. He never went back to the sea after that night. The ocean, once his home, had become a place of terror. He spent the rest of his life warning others, telling them to be careful, to respect the sea and the creatures that lived within it. But no one listened. Years later, after Mangtonyo passed away, I came across his journal. In it, he had written about the encounter in detail, describing the creature and the events of that night. But there was one entry that stood out, a warning. He wrote, "If you ever find yourself on the open sea, and the water grows still and silent, leave immediately. For what lies beneath the waves is far more terrifying than any monster of legend." I believe him. And after hearing this story, I think you will too.